Welcome to Survivorship, moving from surviving to thriving. Today, I'm so excited to have my good friend, Jodi Orgill Brown, to talk about her survivorship and the things that she's gone through and how she has built a beautiful life that she can thrive in. Jodi is an adversity architect. Well, the adversity architect. She's an anti-fragility, resilience, and interactions expert, a motivational speaker, brain tumor survivor, author of 5 amazing books that we'll talk about at some point, champion storyteller, certified business coach, and consultant. So excited to welcome you today to Survivor Shift, Jodi.
Thank you,
So,
Tammy, for having me here.
so Jodi is a brain tumor survivor. And anyway, went through a lot of horrible things with that whole experience. And in her book, The Sun Still Shines, she talks about those experiences. And I remember the chapter that you talked about after being in the hospital and having so many complications from your surgery. And you talked about that low point that you were in. And it was really heart-wrenching and beautifully written. But can you talk a little bit about that and what that experience was like and that pit that you ended up in?
You know, you go into an experience thinking, okay, we're going to come out conquer. No matter what it is, you think you're going to be the one that's going to be the exception. And when they told me I had at first an inoperable brain tumor, I did not sink in. I thought, okay, we just haven't found the right person yet. And then we did find the person who was going to operate. And I started hearing about the horror stories of how bad it could be. And I still thought, well, they don't know me. They don't know Jodi, the conquer the world, get her done girl. Like, if anyone is going to survive this, if anyone's going to come out on top, it's going to be me. And so when I was weeks and weeks into my hospital stay, they had initially expected I would go in for one surgery and 5 days in the hospital. And I ended up having 3 brain surgeries. I was in neurocritical care for 35 days. I had facial paralysis. I lost the hearing in my ear. I had a brain infection. I just had all of the list of the things that could possibly go wrong started going wrong. And I got to that point where I started questioning whether the get her done girl was going to be able to get it done, whether I was going to be able to stick around. And I realized for the first time, or one of the first times, that I may not actually be able to control whether or not I survived this experience. That it takes more than a great attitude and positivity, and it was more than that. It was out of my hands to a certain extent. And when I hit that low moment, and I hit lots of low moments, and sometimes I have to realize there were levels of low. There was the lowest I'd ever been, and then that low became even lower days later when I got sicker and sicker and sicker. And that point came when I wasn't sure why I was here anymore. I wasn't sure what my life was about, what it was even for, if I had any value left. I was literally a body in a bed. There was so little left to my physical sense. And I was so out of it so much of the time that it was hard to see the value that I had. And certainly some of the people around me made it seem like there was no value left in me.
Right.
Because when the people who are paid to care for you don't treat you like a person, they treat you like a name on a chart or a task to be checked off, you start to question what's left. And I was at one of those low, low moments. I was desperately sick. I had an infection that they hadn't been able to diagnose that was literally killing me.
Oh boy.
And I didn't know that I was even going to make it through the night. I believed it was my last night on earth. Um,
Oh, that's heartbreaking. Heartbreaking to know the just the depth of darkness that you were in. and suffering.
The beauty of the feelings and the depth of the darkness is that then when the light comes, you can see the huge contrast. And when the solution came, when the right answers came, when someone came and gave me a powerful prayer and blessing, and then magically the right doctor, a visiting resident, came into the room and talked to my husband, and between them, they had some ideas of things to check. And they went and took me in and had some tests done. And immediately, when they found the problem, they also knew the solution. And the solution
Oh,
was a
wow.
relatively simple one. And they were able to, within about 12 to 24 hours, get me back on track. Now, get me back on track still means I was still in the hospital. I was still in the ICU. I still had to have more brain surgeries, but I was no longer in fear of losing my life at that moment. And so I just had to keep holding on to the hope that something was going to come and take me from that low point to being able to see that little bit of light to hold on to and have some hope that things would get better.
Was there a point in being in that dark place where you did at least teeter on the cliff of feeling hopeless?
Oh, absolutely. I there was a time where I truly thought, I know that this is my last night on earth, and I was feeling sorry for my family because I thought, they don't know. They don't realize my husband is sitting here holding my hand or sitting next to my bed. But if he knew what I know, which is that I am about to die, he would not be just sitting there so casually. But I truly believed with everything in me that I was taking my last breaths within minutes of that moment. And I thought that it didn't matter what I did or anyone else did, but that it was game over for me. There was no hope left. And that was a very, very difficult point to come to.
Right.
And yet, within seconds, probably, of accepting that that was my fate that I believed at that point in time, I was overcome with a sense of peace. And I believed it was peace in dying. But really, it was more of a peace in the fact that I was willing to give up my own will, which was to live. And I finally thought, I'm not going to live anymore. This is it. This is the end. And when I gave up my will and accepted that it wasn't within my control, I actually had a very overwhelming, beautiful experience, a little touch of divinity that kept me going
Wow.
when I was at my lowest point.
Wow. I love that so many times when I've talked to people, it's a game changer when we can give up our plan, right? Our plan and how we think our life should go, right? Or how the situation should end, right? When we give that up. And so, do you feel like you were able to turn it over to God at that point? Is that, or was
Yes,
it? Yeah,
absolutely. I felt like I was accepting his will for my life, which I still believed meant that I was going to die, but
right.
that I finally was okay that that was going to be the outcome. And it was
Wow.
when I honestly believed I was taking my last breaths and letting it go. That was when the peace came. Because to me, that was my acceptance that I was leaving this earth, but I was finally okay with it. And for someone who likes to be in control, who is a type A personality, I wanted to control everything in life.
Sure.
I graduated college in 3 years. I wanted to plan like the month and the day that I was going to have my babies. Oh my, that's a little bit of a wake up call. I wanted to put it on the calendar so I could arrange it around my jobs and around my schooling and all the things. I want to have it on the calendar and I want to have a reminder so I know I'm going to, do it on time, and I want to come through with 150% of my effort. And so to let it all go and say, not my will, but thine be done. Like, I am letting go of all control in this situation, and I'm willing to accept that thy will for my life is that it's going to end this night, June 7th, because that is exactly what I believed was happening in that moment.
Wow. Wow. Um, I know when I read about it and now hearing it again, it makes me ponder, my own pits. And it's amazing to me how, regardless of the trauma or the reason we end up in these dark pits, that there's a lot of similarities in that. And for me, growing up with the things that, I had to deal with, I got to a point when I was 18 where, well, I several times, 16 and 18 was the deepest pit that I was in. And not knowing, not even seeing how I could possibly live through the things that I was facing. And so kind of coming from a different angle, but still that feeling of, I don't even see how this is possible. And having to give up again, my idea of how I wanted my life to be. I didn't want my life to be surrounded by trauma. I wanted to get to choose to no, I'm not going to even worry about any of this stuff. I'm just going to, move along to my own plan. And when you're in that pit, you do realize how little control we really have. So I can relate to that, not my will, but thine be done. And for me, it meant not taking the actions to take my life, because I thought that was the only way out of it. At that, in those moments, that was my plan, but still the answer was the same, right?
Isn't that interesting that your plan was going to be to take your life? I thought the plan for me was that I was going to die. It gets to a point where you really see no other way out of the situation that you're in. And
Right,
that's regardless of, I think that happens to so many people, regardless of what their trauma is, what their situation
right.
is. I have heard over and over and over again in writing one of my other books, my latest book, Depression Fighter, which you have a chapter, a beautiful chapter in. In reading all of the different stories, it is amazing to me to see how many people felt like they were at that exact same place.
Yep,
Either I'm going to die because of the things that I've done to myself or the situation that I'm in or what's happening to my body, or I'm going to take my life because I don't see any other way out of this mess that I'm in. And
right.
I think it's a natural human experience that we get to a point where when we're too deep within our own heads, we can't see any other option. And that's one of the
Right.
lessons that I think that I have learned is anytime I start to go down in a downward spiral with my mental health, I realize I'm too in my own head. I have
Yep,
got to get out of myself and remember the people around me. That's one of
absolutely.
the things that brings me out of my own despair and my own pit is to remember I'm not the only person in the world and I'm not even the only person feeling this way. And if I
Right.
can find someone else to help with their story, I forget about my own.
Right. I'm a very visual person. So I have this visual of, like, if you're like a little alien with eyeballs on the outside of your head, on little antenna kind of
Okay.
things. And and it's like, okay, when I get that way, like you said, I end up in a depressive pit, or, and sometimes I don't know about you, but with the effects of the things that I have suffered, it's like I walk into the pit with no warning signs and I'll be in this pit, but every time I can see those eyeballs are turned this way.
Oh,
And so
wow.
I pray,
Wow.
to have, and I need God's help. I can't just decide, oh, I've got to go help somebody else or whatever. I have to pray. And it's a big effort to get those eyeballs to turn around and see outside myself.
What a
And
powerful metaphor. Oh my gosh, I love that. I'm going to use that. I'm going to quote you on that because
okay,
that is
you can.
exactly the thing, right? It's like
Hmm.
when all of that focus is on us, then where is it going to stay? It's going to just take us further, further, further away from
Hmm.
where we need to be, which is to turn those eyes around and start looking at all of the things around us.
Right,
Sometimes that's enough to just remind us that, hey, there's some good things going on in the world too. The sun is shining today.
right.
The
Your
you know
first book.
my book and or look, there's people outside walking their dogs and with their children and kids are laughing. Sometimes it's something as simple as that. And other times it is something bigger, like I need to turn outside of myself and go find someone to help. Uh,
Yes,
Interesting
yes.
though, because even when we know the things that we should do, sometimes those eyeballs still get turned around.
Yeah, it's like, and I think that's part of the healing process for me has been it's okay when I'm not okay. It's okay that I mess up, I miss the cues of what I should have been doing or focusing on or whatever. It's all okay because we can have help to get those eyeballs facing where they need to be. And I think another part of that too is having an open heart at the same time, because for me anyway, I tend to want to wall off my heart, vulnerability issues and that kind of thing. So if I try to turn those eyeballs out without having an open heart, it's not really as effective. How about, do you feel that same way that it's kind of you have to look at both things or?
Yes, and the interesting thing for me, that first half of my life, the get her done girl, conquer the world girl, I honestly, and I'm almost embarrassed to admit this now, but I think it's important to admit it. I don't think I believed in things like depression, anxiety,
Mm,
PTSD, because I had never gone through anything that caused those issues in my own life. I hadn't had any kind of major trauma that would force me to
right,
experience those. And so when I would hear people talk about things, I did not get it. There was a disconnect. Like it did not make sense. There was no link in the chain. I was like, and
right.
I really, really believed it was a matter of them not doing something. Oh, well, of course you're going to be depressed if you're just laying around your house all the time. Get up and do something. Go take a shower, go out on a walk, and you're going to feel better. And while there is science and truth to that,
Right.
I was not seeing the bigger picture, which is that you don't always have control of some of the things that are going on mentally.
Nope.
And for me, with my brain tumor, my brain was actually changed, including some of the chemistry in my
I
brain.
can
And so
imagine.
I went in as this type A girl, and I came out petrified of the whole world. We would be in a car and my husband would start to just go fast and I would start to shake and have anxiety and almost have a panic attack and it would cause a fight as we're driving down the road because I was scared to death that he was going too fast and we were going to get a crash and I was going to end up back in the hospital and I mean I didn't realize all of the things that were happening in my own body and my own brain. I certainly had never understood those things before, and I didn't recognize that they were happening to me in those moments. I thought he was doing something wrong. I didn't realize it was my brain feeling unsafe, going through my trauma all over again, even though it looked totally different in that scenario. And
Right.
different scenarios would pop up over and over again. And the latest happened just this summer, just weeks, months ago, when I went in for surgery. This was my 26th surgery. Maybe it was my 25th when this one happened. I don't know. But, and I was supposed to have one outcome from the surgery that we were expecting. And the doctors came 12 hours before we were having surgery. I had flown across the country to New York to have this procedure expecting that they were going to put a mechanical device in my eye that would allow me to open and close my eye. And 12 hours before surgery, they said there's so much damage and scar tissue built up in your eye. We are not going to be able to fix it when we go into surgery. Instead, we're going to have to sew your eye closed. And boy, oh boy, oh
Oh,
boy, that
oh,
sent me, even though that's not the biggest of the traumas that I've had, it
right,
was unexpected. Um, it meant that not only do I have a deaf side, I was going to have a blind side as well. I was going to lose my depth perception. I it was going to change the aesthetics of how I look, and definitely how I function. And when they did that surgery, and I started trying to adjust to another new normal. I feel like that's my specialty is figuring out the new normal in life.
right.
But as I was figuring out that new normal, I was having a really, really hard time. And I went to a conference just a couple of weeks after my surgery. And I had, of course, believed my surgery was going to fix my problem. So I thought I was going to go feeling better. And instead, I have this blind and deaf side. And the first thing that happened when I got to the conference, I was walking to the registration table. I saw the sign up above that says turn to your right to go register. And I turned and I crashed full body into someone who was standing right next to me, who I had neither seen nor heard standing there. And I was horrified and apologetic. I'm like, so sorry. I'm so sorry. And then he saw me and said, oh, I was on your blind side. And then we started a conversation, and he was incredibly giving and understanding. And it was
Mm,
actually a very good conversation. But my fight or flight kicked in, and I just thought, oh my gosh, what am I even doing here? And
right.
all of that anxiety kicked in again, and I started thinking, I shouldn't be here. Not only am I with 1,000 other people, there's vendor booths, there's signs, there's tables, there's chairs everywhere. It felt like I was in a landmine area. And I went and checked into the conference and thought, okay, I have to constantly be checking what's on my right side, or walk next to the wall so that nothing, so that I can't have any situations like that. And I was so busy watching my right side that I crashed into a table on my left side and broke two of my toes. And that
Oh,
happened within the first hour that I was at the conference.
oh my gosh. That's enough
And
to make you say, never mind, I'm packing it in. I'm done. I'm done.
amen,
I'll just
sister.
stay home.
So I went back to my room. I lay down on my bed and I just started to sob. And then I took off my shoe and I looked at my foot and I thought, oh my gosh, what do I
Yeah.
even do? And I was not in a good place. I was not in a good place. And I saw one of my friends later on the next day. Once I'd had some rest and I got up on my own time frame. I didn't try to be at all of the conference meetings. I got up when I felt like I could. And I was meeting with one of my friends and I told him like what a disaster my life was and how I was feeling and how depressed and how low I was. And I have to love this friend. He's a New Yorker. He says it like it is. And he says, Jodi, go read your own damn book. He
I love
says,
that.
you
I love that.
know what to do. You know what to do. You've literally written the book on it. And he was
Wow.
referring to Depression Fighter.
Right.
And he
Oh my
says,
gosh.
I've read the book over and over again when I'm having a hard time. And I know the answers that you need right now for your life are in your own book. Go read your book.
Wow. Beautiful. Oh my gosh.
And that was a powerful moment because I thought, he's right. I do know what to do. But in this case, my eyes were turned solely on me,
Right.
focused on woe is me. Look at how hard my challenge is in this moment. And that's all I could see until he turned my eyes around again.
Right. Right. That, you know, I think most of the time we do have the answers. We do have the answers. They're right in front of us, right around us. Before we started recording, we both talked about finding answers in weird places on the radio or in a movie or that kind of thing. but we have the answers to look around, and that's always the biggest tool. So I really love that. And then too, it seems like it kind of helped you regain your own power, empowerment. It's like, wait, this is who I am. No, not the wimpy, melting person isn't really, it's who I feel like right now, but
Yes.
it's not who I really am. So to have that reminder of, no, who is Jodi? This is Jodi, this is Jodi, and stand up to that and kind of, I guess, own it, own that piece of light, own that light of who you are and what you know and what you've already been through. So I love that. So I know you
I
have,
love what you said, what I've already been through, because the
yeah,
reality is I have survived everything I've gone through to this point in time
right.
in my life. And some of them have been much bigger, harder fights. And so
Yes.
remembering I've made it through everything to this point, I can make it through this too. Survivor shift is about change. It's about
Yes.
transformation. It's
Yes.
And that transformation happens when we lean into the cracks of life, don't try to hide from them. When I can
Oh,
say, yes, I'm having a
I
hard
love that.
time, but I can get through it. I've been harder,
That
darker, deeper places before. I can climb out of this hole too.
I love that. So that's a good survivor shift right there. So with all of the things that you've been through, I mean, you keep having to reinvent yourself or reinvent your life, maybe not yourself necessarily, but to reinvent your life. So what would you say is the most valuable shift? Is there one valuable shift that has worked every time, or are there a series of different shifts that have
I think the
happened?
shifts may be a little different according to the situation you're in, but there are
Right.
a couple of things, two things in particular that I think stick out to me. One is a pivotal moment for me was realizing I don't have to stay in survival mode. I can choose
Right.
a new trajectory.
Right. Yes.
Everyone in the world gives me permission to stay home and stay in bed and recover. And they've given me that permission for years
Hmm.
because I've continued to have all of these struggles. And if I listened to that and if I just stayed home and stayed in bed, I would be so depressed, there would be no point left in my life
Right.
because, again, the eyeballs would be solely focused on me. And so to realize I didn't have to stay stuck in just trying to survive, but that I could create a totally different path for myself, one that involved thriving and shining and living the life I wanted. I'd say that was one huge change that pivoted my mindset.
I love that. And you know what? And we have a choice every step of the way, even when it doesn't feel like we're strong enough to make the choice. I've had a lot of times in that it's like, I don't know if I can. And sometimes I don't know if I want to keep going forward. But the
You get
reality is,
tired.
yeah, it's heavy, right? Life
Mhm.
can be heavy, and sometimes you just get tired of carrying it around. But I love that. I love that reminder. That's beautiful, a beautiful thing that we all need to remember.
I think the second big lesson that I learned was, and I actually teach about this now when I go and speak, and I teach this to organizations and individuals, is that there is a shift from reacting to something to
Mm,
responding to something. And
yes.
that's where you can claim power, is when you respond. Responding is intentional, it's thoughtful, it is planned, it is not fight or flight. This is my
Right.
body's way of handling this situation. This is my brain's protection system of handling it. It's let me think about this. Here's how I'm going to handle it. And now I'm at a point where I can take that even one step backwards, forward and backwards. But I can say, okay, what are the triggers that are going to cause me to have a reaction?
Right.
And
Yes.
if I
Okay.
can identify the triggers, then I can prepare for those and I can plan my response before the incident even happens.
Right. And I love that too, the progress. You can build on the first thing you learn. I like to again, my visualizing things. I see like a cliff. I keep falling off this cliff, right? And end up in this pit. And then I have the tools now to figure out, and I gain new tools every time I'm in a pit. But then I find, okay, that cliff has some flags, red flags right at the edge. And so
Ooh.
at first I get to, oh, okay, I know I'm at the edge of I see the red flags. And so then I can do a little bit of preparing. But then as time goes on and I learn those tools of how to avoid, and sometimes I still don't avoid the pit. I just got to put that out there. But, and then though, the more you practice, then you can see, oh, there's some orange flags before the red flags.
Oh,
Okay, I have a little more
so
power
good.
now. I have a little more preparation. And then it even can back up if it's the same pit that you fall into. Like for me, a big pit is just total loss of self-confidence all of a sudden out of nowhere. But then there's a yellow flag. And then there's even white flags way back. So you can see it long before it comes. And so I love that. I
Those
really,
concepts go together so well. And yet,
yeah,
so many times people are like, how do I handle it when I'm in this situation? And now my first thought is, how did you get in this situation? There is something that triggered you to get there. And if you can start
yep,
seeing the flags, the warning flags along the way, then you can avoid the situations so you don't fall off the cliff. And
right.
so I think the concepts are very much the same. And one of the other things I think I've realized for myself, people talk about, oh, what did you learn? How did you heal? How did I heal? Well, one tiny step at a time. Healing isn't
Yes.
something that happens overnight. It's not like, oh, I finished my 10 days worth of antibiotics and now I'm better.
Yeah.
No, it is one moment, one step, one positive action at a time. And it's the accumulation of thousands of those little tiny steps that put you 1,000 miles down the road from where you started.
Right. And often it doesn't feel like you're going anyplace at all. But if you
And
just keep
sometimes you
doing
don't
it,
know where you're even headed or why you're going there.
right,
You just know if I stay where I am, it's not a good place. And so I'm just going to go forward for the sake of not being where I am right now. And
right.
that sounds silly. Sometimes you may not have a destination, you may not have a spot on the map you're trying to reach, but you know, I can't be here anymore. And so you
That's
take a step.
beautiful. That's a beautiful reminder that sometimes all we have to know is we can't stay where we are. So we got to figure out what's the next little tiny step or something, that we can do to kind of change our trajectory maybe, or start getting us out of the pit we find ourselves in. So many beautiful things. We could talk for hours and hear all of your lovely wisdom. I love this. But um, I always like to give my guest an opportunity to share just one message of hope for those out there that are listening or watching. What would that message of hope be?
You get to create your own transformation.
Love
Your
it.
future is imaginary until you create it. So make it what you want. The definition of anxiety is literally when you imagine the future and you imagine the worst thing happening, and that's why you get nervous and anxious. But if you
Right.
imagine the best thing happening, then that's the future that you can create for yourself. And you may
I
need to
love
be
that.
specific in the steps that you outline so that you can accomplish that. But start on your own personal transformation. You do not have to be a victim of your circumstances. You can
Right.
be the victorious winner who creates the life they want to live.
I love that. Perfect for building on the light, which is going to be our next podcast. I love that. Thank you so much, Jodi, for taking the time to share your messages and, for just holding on to all the opportunities you have to learn through the trials that you've been in. You're just a great and vibrant example. Thank you so much.
Can I make one little offer, which is that
Yes.
anyone of your listeners or viewers who are interested, if you will email me at Jodi, Jodi, at jodibrown.com. I will give you a copy of one of my books. I will email you an e-copy of either Depression Fighter or my best-selling memoir, The Sun Still Shines, because I truly believe there is something in them for everyone. And if I can be the means of helping you turn your eyes the right way and focus on the good, then I am happy to do that.
Thank you so much, Jodi. And I will put that information in the description as well when I post this. So thank you. Thank you again, Jodi, so much. And thank you to our viewers and listeners. And I hope you had some good takeaways from this episode and hope to see you at the next episode of Survivorship, moving from surviving to thriving.